Hello and welcome to Dialogue. The ongoing 20th National Congress of the Communist Party of China has presented a comprehensive report outlining Chinese policies on both domestic and foreign fronts. What's China's role in the world as outlined in the report? How to handle relations with the US? And how will China develop relationship with the global South? To help us answer these questions, I'm joined today by Professor Huang Jing, Director of the Institute of the U.S. and Pacific Studies of Shanghai International Studies University, and Helga Zepp-LaRouche, founder and president of the Schiller Institute. That's our topic. I'm Xu Qianduo. Welcome to the discussion. Helga, we'll start with you. As we are now more than halfway through this 20th CPC National Congress, so tell us, what impressed you the most?
Well, I'm very impressed by the role China is playing in a world which Xi Jinping has correctly, in my view, characterized as confronted with challenges the worst ever in history, because I think that is the condition in which this Party Day takes place. And China plays the role like a rock in the ocean, like a rock in the surf. And it has become, for sure, the hope for the global South, the developing countries, because it has demonstrated that despite all challenges, it follows a policy of correct economic policy by, putting always innovation first, putting the human creativity first. And that has led to a remarkable situation that China did not have any so-called cycles. And I think this is an economic model which serves to be studied by the rest of the world, because this is happening at the same time when the Western world, the neoliberal system, is experiencing a hyperinflationary collapse. So I think that the things which were promoted by Xi Jinping in his report, the idea of non-interference, the idea of the special role of the youth, the qualification of the leadership. I'm also very impressed by this conception of the whole democracy process, which I think is a superior model of democracy than the Western democracy, despite the fact that the West is talking about the fight between the so-called democracies and the autocracies. I have come to the conclusion that China, which is accused to be an autocracy, is actually more democratic than the West.
Yeah, that's in terms of the model of governance. Professor Huang, what's the key information or key message you have received from the conference?
Several points. First is that for the first time raised this kind of issue of China-style modernization, which emphasized on distribution, solid leadership, innovation, education, and talent. And secondly, China will insist on the reform and the openness. Some countries will try to, practice trade protectionism, but China said China is firmly opened up and try to promote global economy. Of course, that's also in the interest of China's own. Third is China's firm commitment to global peace, world peace, and this kind of commitment to build the human community with shared future. Last but not the least, of course, is China's emphasis on development and peaceful development, and believe that China had to develop itself first, then China can make more constructive and a bigger contribution to the global community.
Well, Professor Huang, speak of contributing to global peace at the press conference on Thursday, hosted by Vice Foreign Minister Ma Zhaoxu. He made it very clear that the goal and purpose of China's diplomacy is to maintain world peace, promote common development, and advance the building of a human community with a shared future. So tell us more about the Chinese initiative, basically global development initiative to push forward common development. I guess that's a development, not for more than a few countries. It's about basically every country should be able to benefit from such kind of initiative, such kind of development.
Yes, this kind of development initiative started from the realization and commitment that, like President Xi Jinping said quite a while ago, that only the world is doing good, can China doing well. I think that's very impressive. given that there is some country right now seek hegemony and seek like American first, and I think China is in a much higher moral high ground as well, a much higher strategic view of how this world is going to develop.
Well, Helga, Xi Jinping reiterated China's proposition of building a human community with a shared future. He also put forward, as we mentioned, the Global Development Initiative and the Global Security Initiative. These represent, to a large extent, about the Chinese views, Chinese position and policies in terms of the role for China in the international community. What do you make of that?
I personally think that this is the most important strategic initiative on the global agenda. We have reached a point in world history where one needs a global security initiative in combination with a global development initiative. The new security initiative must include the US, Europe, the NATO countries, but also emphatically Russia and China and all the other countries on the planet.
Professor Huang, when people talk about security in particular, you often see countries, it seems to me there's a lack of consensus. For example, when NATO expanded to the east part of Europe, for NATO countries, they see it as a defensive move. But for Russia, that's seen as aggressive, and that's present a threat to their national security. And when NATO talk about shifting their focus to Asia, targeting China, they think also that's a defensive move. But for China, people feel threatened. So in what way can we talk to each other and have a better understanding? Security of every country probably should be taken into consideration.
I think the fundamental problem for NATO and also the United States is that they prioritize their security above other people's. They think that to make themselves feel secure, the others has to be cracked down or put down. That is, any other people's development, they will see as a threat because they want to dominate the whole world. And this has really problematic in my view, because if you try to secure your safety at the expenses of others, of course, what you're doing is to create a threat, real threat to the others. Like you mentioned, the NATO's eastward expansion. It's not a defensive. If defensive, you don't have to expand. Expansion itself by nature is aggression, of course. When you expand to the doorstep of other people feel threatened. We remember 1962, United States will even allow Cuba, a little tiny country, has a kind of good relationship with then the Soviet Union, will not allow them to deploy strategic weapons on the island because the United States feels threatened, right? So United States push all the way to South China Sea, to Indo-Pacific, to Taiwan water because United States feels threatened. But turn the table around. It is a country that have American warships and airplanes always at your doorstep that should really feel threatened. So therefore, I think President Xi Jinping's recent issue said common security based on if we want to have a peaceful world, we have to make sure that no one has a right to put their security above other people's. If you do that, you actually undermine the security as a whole, because you threaten others have to resist. And that resistance will be explained or arguably by a threat to others. That's really kind of funny, because if you want peace, you'd better provide a kind of way that others will also feel peace. If you try to build up your security at the expenses of others, of course, that's an invitation of confrontation.
Well, Helga speak of this security and different understanding sometimes among different organizations and countries. The Chinese side stress very much about the common security. Basically, the security of every side, every country should be taken into consideration. But then recently, you have the top diplomat from the European Union talked about EU or Europe as a garden, while the rest of the world is the jungle, or following the law of jungle. He apologized for that kind of comparison, but still he insists basically to the idea. What does that reflect in terms of this mentality or mindset in viewing the other side of, let's say, the world?
I hate to say, but this reflects a good portion of racism on the side of Mr. Borrell. And the US, is forcing Europe to do policies which are undermining the very economic existence of Europe. So I would not give too much credit to what Mr. Borrell is saying, because he is really not representing Europe. He's representing some other influence to which he capitulates.
Mm-hmm. Professor Huang, let's take a closer look at the Chinese policy in terms of the handling the international community and other countries with engagement here. Xi Jinping, in his report, said that China will never seek hegemony or engage in expansionism. For those who are not familiar with the Chinese policy or Chinese principle of foreign policy making, it's not the first time a Chinese leader, made such pledges in public. Tell us, where is this idea from? Why has China been insisting on not to seek hegemony, even when it is a powerful or big economy, and not to engage in expansionism?
I think that, because right now the United States and European countries, they went through a history of imperialism, colonialism. So first, like Olga just said, there's a kind of racist element in there. They think what they did before and China will follow their footsteps. So they believe this kind of doctrine that if you become powerful and great, you will have to bully others. But that's not the case of China. China has thousands of civilizations and understand if you bully others, if you try to expand your influence at other expenses, then there's a payback time. And first, and second, that does not serve China's interest. China rise in the past 40 years by peaceful development. China is the first global power in human being history, rise to the stardom of global power without really invade other people, really colonize or invading other people. And China understands that peaceful development is not only China's policy, but also serves China's best interests. Those people don't believe it because, number one, they have a double standard. They always have a double standard. That they can do something other people cannot. And first, and secondly, there's a mindset. Like I said, the mindset is in a kind of Cold War mentality. They believe that if a country is powerful enough to challenge them, then there must be a result that this country. So like China, we challenge the hegemony. The bottom line is that they want to maintain the dominance of the global affairs. They want to maintain the privilege on other people's cost. So therefore, they cannot tolerate, they cannot stand the other people will rise up to their level, even still below them. They feel threatened. They feel threatened not because of China's rise, not because China's never existing expansion. They feel threatened because they believe or they think that China's rise will eventually undermine their interests, which is non-existent.
Mm-hmm. Well, Helga, Xi Jinping also stressed that the country opposes this Cold War mentality, interferences in other countries' internal affairs, or double standards, protectionism, unilateralism, etc. At the same time, China made it very public. It will never seek hegemony, will never engage in expansionism. So tell us, what is the goal? What is the purpose of the Chinese foreign policy? If you look at their track records, in addition to what they say about their policy, and goals and purposes.
Well, I'm very happy that President Xi Jinping and the Chinese government still continue to offer to the United States to cooperate. Because the two largest economies in the world have to find a way to work together if the world is supposed to have a good future. Unfortunately, right now the United States is escalating the attack on China. They have put out a new national security strategy paper, which defines China as the largest geopolitical challenge ever. And there is now a big effort by the US, by the British on Europe, that they should follow the exam. I mean, they have ruined basically the relationship between Europe and Russia completely. There is right now a complete decoupling between the European economy and the Russian economy. Now they say we have to learn from the experience of Russian dependency on Russian energy. Now we have to reduce the dependency on the Chinese market. Now, if they continue that, it will be the economic suicide of Europe. And I think that the continuous emphasis by China to say, no, we continuously offer to cooperate. In this turmoil, I'm sure that eventually this voice of reason will be heard in Europe because, the Europeans are going through an existential crisis. I'm sure that the German industry, the Italian industry, the French industrialists, they all know they will not be able to survive without working together with China.
Mm-hmm. Well, Huang Jing, Helga mentioned a very interesting point and also a very critical point in terms of this global development. In the speech, Xi Jinping, he did warn of potential challenges, for the Chinese side, saying, be ready to withstand the high winds, choppy waters, and even dangerous storms. Some people would say, probably the U.S. moves, for example, the latest move, like a tech war, sweeping ban on export of semiconductors. Basically, the message is clear. That is, the U.S. will do everything it can, short of a hot war, to prevent China from continuing rise, continuing development. Is that part of the danger, probably, or the risks China faces?
I think, of course, that put huge pressure on China as a challenge because China is a developing world. China needs to work with others to develop this economy, especially high-tech side. So what United States trying to do is try to block China from upgrading its economy. But frankly, I think in the long term, this kind of strategy, try to decouple with China, will really hurt the United States itself. And Europeans, just like Helga said, are suffering already. I hope they're going to wake up very soon because the global economic globalization is not a product, it's not a result from any government strategy or policy. It was driven by market forces because market forces want to, most efficiently utilize the resources, try to increase the sufficiency of productivities, try to maximize profits. That's why we have globalization. That's why we have supply chain. What United States did is anti the trend, it's kind of irony, really ironic, that American, which is established on capitalism, try to do something against the market forces. In the short run, it seems very severe, very effective, but long run, it undermines United States economy because we know that any products, you have to get into 4 stages. First is research and development. Second, to turn the research result into product. The third, to massively produce this product. And the last but not the least, the 4th step is to put it on the market. Only the last step, you can make a profit. Others, you have to put money in. I do not say how United States can work out this, try to put all the high tech in their own country, but China and the rest of the world is the largest market. How can they make a profit? So in the long run, I think this policy is going to bankrupt. As a matter of fact, if the stock market is honest, we see that as soon as Biden administration announced this kind of policy, the stock of all those industries dropped like stone, and that tells us that how effective, so-called effective, this policy is. And so my argument is that yes, in the short run, it will put some pressure and difficulties on China, but in the long run, what it undermines is nobody but its initiators, that is United States.
Mm-hmm. Well, Helga, that's some countries are doing exactly. People call it like either nearshoring or friendshoring. Basically, you want to bring back this manufacturing, this production line as close as to your home market, or even to your home market completely, like what the U.S. Has been trying to do. For example, the manufacturing of EVs or the batteries. President Biden has said that the U.S. will compete with China to make sure their share of the production of batteries or the EVs will increase, even at the expense of, say, their European partners or, say, South Korea or Japanese their electric vehicles, for example. But the long term, is that the right way to go instead of say globalization, a global market with the most efficient resources allocation probably by itself?
Well, I think the recent pandemic has shown that countries do well if they have certain questions like food security, energy security, to protect their economies even in times of crisis. But in general, I think the idea to curb international cooperation, it's not going to work. I mean, right now, for example, you have this incredible situation where, I mean, we in Germany in particular, we are going to crash against the wall this winter because the sanctions against Russia backfire. It has not hurt Russia so much, a little bit, but it's about to devastate the German economy, and with that, naturally, the European economy, because Germany is the largest economy in Europe. I think that, it's high time that a completely different geometry is being introduced, a new paradigm in thinking. We should be patriots, yes, but we should be at the same time world citizens where the one humanity is put first. And I'm convinced that nobody has the right to put their national interest above the interest of the one humanity.
Mm-hmm. Well, Huang Jing, the spokesperson for the 20th CPC National Congress, Sun Yili, he talked about the China-U.S. relationship. Basically, he called for both countries to get along with each other. He used the word like basically the two countries must get along with each other, and they should have the wisdom, the opportunity, and the capability to find a way for peaceful coexistence, basically despite all the, let's say, moves taken by Washington against Beijing. What do you make of the Chinese policy toward the United States?
Of course, it's always China's policy to seek cooperation rather than confrontation or conflict. So this policy has always been there, but it's the United States since Trump administration and now Biden administration make it worse. They see China groundlessly as a threat. I think the major reason here, in my view, is that the United States as a society, as a nation, is deeply divided. And as a result, the policy making, the politics is polarized. The kind of infight is so bad, it's so intensive that they have to find something to put themselves together. And conveniently now they see China's rise as a threat to the United States. But if you really look at the bilateral relationship of the United States and China, you have to say that this is the most important bilateral relationship on earth. If the United States and China get into a kind of confrontation, we all suffer. It's disastrous. That's why China is rational and wise enough to always insist on a cooperative relationship with the United States, at least manageable. Can you imagine if Chinese leadership also behave like Donald Trump or Joe Biden behave? See, the other side are enemy, we're all in a big trouble. So I believe that it takes two to tango. But if China refuses to get into this confrontation conflict initiated by the United States, I think the United States' worst enemy is within its own country. I always argue that this so-called competition between the United States and China is a facade. The most formidable challenge for both China and the United States is from within, from their own country. Fortunately, China has seen this. That's why Xi Jinping has repeatedly emphasized that China has to do its own business well. But the problem is, unfortunately, the United States either seems not to see this or pretend they did not see this. They try to, lash out to take China as a scapegoat. But actually, the real problem for the United States, for Americans, is in the United States. It's not in China. But if you continue to do this, not only they are going to damage the other people's interests, I think first and foremost, they're doing tremendous damage to the United States of America itself. This is quite unfortunate.
Mm-hmm. Well, Haga, on developing relationship with the global South, Xi Jinping said that China continues to basically to strengthen solidarity and cooperation with the developing world and safeguard their common interests. And if you look at a couple of recent reports, actually, they say the Chinese company, business community, their performance or the Chinese engagement with the developing world is actually, let's say, use the word outperforming the West. And so China is indeed improving or strengthening relationship with the global South.
Well, you know, I mean, in a certain sense, what is happening right now is the result of US and NATO hostile policy towards Russia and to a certain extent against China, because what we see right now is a gigantic blowback. What is happening right now, for many reasons, is the emergence of a new economic system. The Belt and Road Initiative is becoming the dominant dynamic in terms of uplifting countries out of poverty. The BRICS countries are very attractive for more developing countries. So you have now even Saudi Arabia wants to become a member of the BRICS. Argentina, I think Iran, and many others are in the same kind of reflection process. So you have the emergence of a new economic system, the Belt and Road Initiative, the BRICS countries, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, and many other organizations of the global south are moving in the direction of adopting an economic system which is geared towards people first, towards the common good of their countries. And, you know, I can only say if the West regards that as a threat, it will be to their own disadvantage, because the only way how we will get out of this crisis is that enough forces in the United States of governors, state legislators, mayors, and also in Europe recognize that we only have one planet, and either we work together with the many challenges we have, or, you know, we go in the direction of confrontation, and we could even, you know, annihilate the human species if it ever would come to a global war, which we are very close to, by the way. So I think, you know, all people of good thinking are really called upon that they start to become more active and demand that the new paradigm of international relations, of respecting sovereignty, of non-interference, basically what the non-aligned movement used to say with the 5 principles of peaceful coexistence, which happens to be in the UN Charter, and it happens to be what the Chinese government is continuously also saying. So I think that, you know, we are in a tremendous change of epoch. I would really say it's an epochal change which we experience. And, you know, I can only repeat myself, the only country which has the concept how to address that is really China and the countries who are working with China.
Well, with that, we come to the end of today's show. Many thanks to our guests. You can also find us on the CGTN app on YouTube. Thank you for being with us. I'm Xu Qinduo. See you next time.